I'm currently employed as a researcher at the Advanced Drug Development Center. Part of our research consists of clinical tests we perform on patients in the general ward of the center. On the day of the crime, I was making my usual rounds through the ward.
And what time was that?
Around 7:50?
You're sure?
Yes, the patients eat breakfast at precisely 8 o'clock. I always head to the break room myself, right around then, too.
This break room, to be precise?
That's correct. Our more mobile patients walk there for breakfast instead of eating in their own rooms. Then, while the nurses help the patients eat, I ask about how they feel and how the medicine is treating them.
And on the day of Waku-san's disappearance, you passed by his room before going to the break room?
Yes,
And in that room, you saw Waku-san lying on the bed.
yes.
Can you describe the situation to us as you remember it?
The door has a window, so you can see into the room from the hallway.
And this is the room you're referring to, yes?
That's correct. From where I was standing in the hallway, I could see Waku-san lying in bed. He was asleep, with a blanket covering most of his body.
And what time was that?
Around 7:50.
No further questions.
Yagami-sensei, why did you call her to the stand?
She actually asked to testify. Is that a problem?
Not really, no.
Terasawa-san, you were present for Shono-san's testimony just now, yes?
Yes.
And what is your opinion on that testimony?
For a scientist, I felt his wording was rather imprecise. And as a medical professional, I felt his actions were negligent.
Could I ask you to be a little more specific?
Our witness, Shono-san, claims he saw Waku-san sleeping in his bed during his morning rounds. However, there's no way he could have known that just by looking in from the hallway.
I have evidence supporting Terasawa-san's testimony. Please look at this. It's a photograph of the victim's room as viewed from the hallway. In other words, this is what Shono-san would have seen when he checked in on Waku-san. Shono-san was lying when he said he saw Waku.
Excuse me?
What he saw from the door was likely nothing more than a bulge of sheet. He couldn't have been able to identify it specifically as Waku-san. So to claim as much in his testimony seems like quite an exaggeration, don't you think?
But common sense would dictate otherwise, would it not? Who would be in the bed other than Waku-san?
The staff nurses are trained to always enter a room when checking in on a patient. In Waku-san's case, it's impossible to tell anything just by looking in from the hallway. There was actually one time a while back where we thought he was under the covers, only to find Waku-san eating in the break room a second later. And upon re-examining the room, we realized that we had mistaken a bunched-up pillow for Waku-san.
The witness makes an important distinction. The prosecution asserts that Shono-san's testimony is clear, that the victim was taken out of his room at some point between 7:50 and 8:30 in the morning. They claim that because of this time frame, the defendant must have smuggled Waku-san's body out in his laundry bin. But if Shono-san's testimony is invalid, as the defense asserts, we have to consider the possibility that Waku-san was taken in the middle of the night when nobody else was around. After which, the killer could have waited until the morning to plant the body in the defendant's. In other words, the defense establishes that there is reasonable doubt that Okubo-san is the killer, rendering the prosecution's central argument. Your Honor, taking this new testimony into account, I'd like to call Shono-san back to the stand for cross-examination. Shono-san.
Yes?
I'll get right to the point. On the day of the crime, what did you see when you looked into Waku-san's room?
I saw Waku-san asleep in his bed, I think.
And did you get a clear look at his face?
I don't remember.
So it's possible that it could have been someone other than Waku-san in that bed. Or maybe even a pillow that you mistook to be Waku-san's body. Isn't that right?
Objection! The defense is leading the witness.
Sustained. Please rephrase the question.
Shono-san, can you say without a doubt that Waku-san was in that bed when you checked on him?
I don't think I can, no.
Then the defense rests. But I do have a quick remark for the prosecution.
Huh?
The charges against my client stem from your assertion that he's the only possible suspect, assuming the crime took place within the stated time frame. However, the defense has proven without a doubt that Shono-san's testimony is unreliable, establishing reasonable doubt for my client. I would suggest then that you withdraw the charges against my client. With such inconclusive evidence, you'll only be wasting the court's precious time.
The prosecution does not consider the witness's testimony inconclusive. His memory of the incident may be fuzzy, yes, but that doesn't change that he saw the victim.
So, your whole case is based on a fuzzy memory? This promising young man's future is at stake, and you're willing to throw that away on unreliable testimony?
Dr. Shono is a bright and diligent researcher. After watching his own grandmother develop dementia, he vowed to create a drug that could cure the disease. After paying his own way through medical school, he went on to become the head researcher at the ADDC. Day after day, Dr. Shono visits his sick patients out of the kindness of his heart, leading to his valiant testimony here today. If you want to know whether I trust this man, then my answer is a resounding yes.
In other words, because he's such a great researcher, his testimony is infallible. His own admission that he's not sure is somehow overlooked? Is that the sum of it? Because from here, it sounds like you're putting your faith in Shono-san's title, not his testimony today.
The prosecution is not as easily swayed as you think. And you want to talk reputation? What of your client's history of domestic abuse? 6 years ago, the defendant broke his girlfriend's finger. The poor girl is still suffering from the effects. And the cause? A minor, drunken disagreement. Now, fast forward to what occurred a few days prior to the crime. Waku-san, suspecting the defendant of stealing his wallet, lashed out and punched the defendant in the face. Given the clearly violent nature of Okubo-san here, that alone would be motivation enough to murder the poor old...
Is something wrong, ma'am? Please remain seated while court is in session. Terasawa-san?
Okubo-san is not a violent person. And he hasn't even had a drink in over 6 years. Not a single drop since the incident.
My court will not stand for this commotion.
He didn't blame Waku-san at all. He knew that the outburst was just caused by his dementia, that it was all the sickness's fault. So there was no reason for him to resort to murder.
Terasawa-san, please.
Okubo-san really is an incredible, caring person.
Please leave this courtroom at once.
You're right that he may be hard to approach, but he's a kind soul, and he always keeps his promises.
Okubo-san's not the only person in this courtroom who would be affected by a guilty verdict, either. As a matter of fact, it would break my heart. And even through it all, he wanted me to keep this a secret, not to tell anyone, not even his lawyer, that we were dating. Even though he knew he could have ended up in prison, making sure I was safe was the only thing in the world he cared about. That's just who he is. But when the prosecution has already decided he's a criminal, how could he possibly be given a fair trial?
Her little outburst wasn't technically admissible, but as the trial dragged on, it hung over the jury like a stone. And in the end, Shinpei Okubo was found not guilty. But only a month after his release, everything changed. The same girl who had so bravely proclaimed Okubo's innocence died by the man's own hand.